Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Brent Bozell, been running the Media Research Center for 25 years. The Media Research Center is an organization that documents not just the bias of the left-wing media, the mainstream media, but virtually every characteristic and example of unfairness, bias, agenda movement, whatever it is. There's nobody better at what they do than Bozell and the Media Research Center. Now, when the President of the United States closes speeches with "God bless America" and "God bless the United States," what does that mean if we have no religious freedom? What does it mean when a president who doesn't believe in religious freedom says "God bless America"? God bless the United States of America. Bozell has written a column about this. Let me read to you portions of it. It said, "You'd think the largest legal action in American history in defense of religious liberty would be a major news story. But ABC, CBS, NBC don't judge news events by their inherent importance as relates to the future of our freedom. They deliver the news according to a simple formula. Does it or doesn't it advance the re-election of Barack Obama? And if it doesn't, it isn't news." On May 21st, 43 Catholic dioceses and organizations sued the Obama administration over its ridiculously narrow idea of how a religious institution can be defined under their Obamacare law. Never has the Catholic Church, or any order for that matter, undertaken something of this magnitude. It is truly jaw-dropping that ABC and NBC completely ignored this action on their evening newscasts, while the CBS Evening News devoted just 19 seconds to this historic event. Now, let's be blunt. They spiked the news. This is, writes Bozell, the worst example of shameless bias by omission that I have seen in the 25-year history of the Media Research Center. We recall the Chicoms withholding from its citizenry for 20 years the news that the U.S. had landed on the moon because it reflected poorly on their government. Never, never would the United States news media behave thusly, but they just did. And it's not an honest mistake. It was not an editorial oversight by the broadcast networks. It did not occur too late for the evening deadline. This was a deliberate and insidious withholding of national news to protect the chosen one, who ABC, CBS, and NBC have worked so hard to elect, and for whom they are now abusing their journalistic influence. Even when CBS mentioned the suit ever so briefly, like so many others, they deliberately distorted the issue by framing it as a contraception lawsuit, when it is much broader. It's a religious freedom issue, and they know it. This should be seen as a very dark cloud on Obama's political horizon. The Catholic Church, 60 million Americans describing themselves as Catholic. The Catholic Church has unleashed legal Armageddon on the administration, promising we will not comply with a health care law that strips Catholics of their religious liberty. If that isn't news, then there's no such thing as news. This should be leading newscasts and the subject of special in-depth reports. So what trumped this story? What took its place? Well, ABC led their evening broadcast and devoted an incredible 3 minutes and 30 seconds to the sentencing of the Rutgers student who spied on his gay roommate with a web camera. NBC aired an entire story on a lunar eclipse. Both CBS and NBC devoted their first 3.5 minutes to prostate cancer screening. Catholic taxpayers who help fund National Public Radio were also ignored on the evening newscast with that sad joke of a title, All Things Considered. The print press isn't much better for the Washington Post, a little one-column story buried on page A6. The fish wrap known as USA Today had a really tiny headline, a 128-word item at the very bottom of A2. The New York Times had a perfunctory 419-word dispatch on page A17. 2 pages later, the Times defined as news what it prefers to report on Catholics. Quote, 2 Philadelphia priests punished in sexual abuse cases. The paper noted one priest has been suspended from ministry for 2 years. The other had been placed on leave in December based on abuse that occurred about 40 years ago. This wasn't really news as a current matter, but this is always and everywhere the bigoted narrative that Times prefers to perpetuate. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, the head of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, used the word horror to describe what Obama is mandating. On the only broadcast show to give Catholics some coverage, CBS This Morning anchor Charlie Rose asked Dolan if the White House misled him on the issue. Dolan began by saying he hesitated to question the president's sincerity, even though anyone who heard Obama's 2009 commencement speech at Notre Dame about honoring the conscience of his opponents on abortion has proven that he's completely insincere. Cardinal Dolan said, I worry, Charlie, members of Obama's team might not particularly understand our horror at the restrictive nature of this exemption that they are giving us. That for the first time that we can remember, a bureau of the federal government seems to be radically intruding into the internal definition of what a church is. We can't seem to get that across. And he's not finding much help getting anything across from the supposed mediators of the National Press Corps. And Bozell's exactly right about this. This is a huge story. 43 Catholic dioceses and organizations sue the regime over Obamacare, religious freedom, First Amendment. It's unprecedented. And nary a mention on most of the networks. It is it's a great illustration, folks, of the not just the bias, but something else about the news. It's what they don't report that is oftentimes as instructive about what they do as what they do report and how. All right, a brief time out.